And a very good morning to Laura Savino in Virginia. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for joining us and giving me some time to have a chat with you on Air Sports News. So, your title on Twitter says you're just an ordinary regular pilot. Who
Yep.
writes?
Yeah.
Over the years, you've flown all the Boeings, really.
Mhm.
All of them. The one that really interests me is the 727. That's the first commercial flight I took, was a 727 back in 1978.
hmm
And what was that like to fly?
Well, I was actually the flight engineer in the 727. Got to fly it in training, but I didn't get to fly it for United Airlines. But after that, then I flew every Boeing that United has. But the 727, boy, it was just a workhorse of the airlines. It was reliable. It was somewhat archaic, to today's standards. Everything was just the old round dials. As a flight engineer, we did everything by hand. So it was really, it's really fun. It was just really fun in a way that I don't think flying is quite fun anymore in that way, but flying is certainly still a blast in every other way.
For me, from a skydiving background,
hmm
727 is one of the only jet aircrafts that we've, over the years, had the potential to jump out of. It was used at an event in the States, a place called Quincy, the World Freefall Convention. It was one of the special guest aircraft. You could go down the back slide, down the back steps.
Yep. So, what altitude did you bring that to jump out of?
Well, I wasn't there at that one. My girlfriend was. She jumped it, but I didn't. So I will find out, actually, and let you know on that. I would imagine it would be normal exit altitude, which would be between 10 and 15,000 feet.
You think normal, as if I know what normal altitude to jump out of an airplane is.
So listen, you're heavily involved now in STEM education.
Trying to be, yep.
How are you managing that on a weekly basis? What do you do, Laura?
Well, I'm just trying to get involved in a lot of different organizations to get young people interested in aviation. As you probably know, they're forecasting a huge shortage for pilots. As far as female pilots go, there's still, I think statistically, only like 4.4% of professional pilots are female. That's like around like the Amelia Earhart era statistic. It really hasn't changed. When I first started flying, I believe it was the number of female pilots was so low, it wasn't even a percentage. It was less than 1%. So it has come up, so that's exciting. But it really is just one of those occupations that just hasn't gone anywhere as far as getting women involved. And so I'm working with the Girl Scouts of America to get aviation in there, to expose girls to aviation. I actually have coming up this month, I'm doing a Career Blast seminar with the Girl Scouts, where I'll be talking to hopefully a very large group of girls about aviation. We'll be able to ask any question they want of me. I'm involved in the 99s. I'm involved in a couple different flying groups in this area. And I wrote a book, which isn't published yet, if anybody wants to publish it. I do have a great agent, just still trying to find a publisher. And that also is a lot of education in there, a lot of motivation to get people interested and to help people realize what a fantastic career flying is. And not just being a pilot, but there's a lot of aspects to aviation. It's really just a phenomenal industry. You can be a controller. There's dispatchers, mechanics. They're all fantastic jobs. It's a great community. And I'll just say I have two sons. I don't have any daughters, so I'm like 100% for boy power too. I want to get more girls into it because there's just so few, I think, that realize they can be pilots or in the aviation industry. But anybody who is interested, I'm eager to help them and whatever I can do to show them the way.
It is incredible. I was looking at your website that only less than 5% of pilots now are female and 1% of captains are female. That seems incredible to me. I can't believe that.
Yeah, those are it is hard to believe, isn't it, in this day and age? But those are, if you go to like the FAA.gov, different websites, I've looked at them all, and the statistics vary a tiny bit, but it's all right about there. So to be a captain for an airline, you have to be pretty senior. And although more women are starting to get into it, the majority of those women are still junior, so they're not captains yet, but they will be.
It will be. They're coming up through the system. So
Mhm.
you started with your interest in aviation as a young girl. You got yourself a job on an airfield, I believe, to begin with.
I did. I have a little bit of an unusual beginning. So I found just my own personal experience that the majority of pilots, especially pilots that are like from a minority group, got into flying because there was some sort of family heritage. They had an uncle, a father, somebody who introduced them to flying, or even maybe they got it from a neighbor or from school or something. I grew up, I'm older, so I grew up at an era where women weren't flying yet, not in the military, not for the airlines, at least not that I was aware of or that anyone that I knew was aware of. And I was raised in a very traditional Italian Catholic house, very conservative values. And I'd never met a pilot in my life. I had never been introduced to flying. And I just reached a point when I was a teenager. I just had this real interest in aviation. I kind of had to keep it a secret because it was sort of a weird thing for a young girl to be interested in. And so I'd say like a teenage active rebellion is what got me into aviation. I got my driver's license as a teenager and found a local airport, Morristown Municipal, MMU, in New Jersey, and just sort of wandered onto the field to check it out, see what, I could see an airplane up close. And before I knew it, I found a flight school, and these guys had me up in the air for a $20 discovery flight. And well, I mean, that was it. I was hooked. I discovered you can take flying lessons, had no idea you could take flying lessons. I mean, who knew? And everybody was so friendly and they were so accepting. And, for the first time, I was really welcomed with open arms into a community where nobody cared that I was a girl, and I was a young teenage girl. So that was really a part of it too, was just feeling so accepted. And I started flying, didn't have any money. So I got a job at the flight school, which I thought was very generous. The owner of the flight school offered me a job in exchange for lessons. And my initial ambition was just to get up in the air a second time and then a third time. And then I thought, wow, you know what? I bet you I could solo this plane. Then my big goal in life was to solo, and I did that. And then from there, I'm like, hey, I can keep going. And then my big goal was to get my private pilot's license. And I did that by the time I graduated from high school. And it just kept growing from there. I kept saying, I could do something more. I could do something more. I could do something more. And just without having any huge aspirations, I eventually made it to the airlines.
By the time you were 25, you were a second officer for United, flying around the world.
I sure was. So I started off as a second officer in the 747 at United Airlines. That was a christening by fire. That was a good old boy airplane. I was based out of New York City, out of JFK. And my first trip was to Asia. And these guys that I flew with, who were wonderful, they were older than my dad and had never flown with, I think with any minority in their lives. They came from a completely different, golden age of aviation. And then to suddenly have me in there in New York on top of it, it was a little bit rough, but it was really exciting. It was really fun. And
did you get any feelings? Did people give you a sense of not being welcome, or any bullying at all in those early days? Did you feel like this?
Yeah, I mean, Regan, there was the classic male chauvinism. Certainly there were some captains that wouldn't speak to me. There were some that I remember on more than one occasion I would, we'd land and I'd go to the blue room and you couldn't see me, but I could hear everything in the cockpit. And as soon as I stepped out, they would start bad mouthing me. But they were perfectly nice to my face. But I think what was even more difficult was the softer misogyny, in that there were passengers that were very upset when they saw me up there. We actually would have passengers walk off the airplane when they saw that I was the pilot. We had, and then we just said, I'll tell you one funny story. You want to hear a funny story?
Absolutely.
So I remember on one flight, I was the captain. So this was not that long ago, years into flying. And I was on the Airbus, and this young mom asked the flight attendant if she could show her daughter, maybe like a 4-year-old girl, if she could show her the cockpit. And she got up there, and I was in the captain's seat, and my first officer was out doing the walk around. So I was up there by myself. Now I'm in the captain's seat in the uniform. I had my headset on, and the mom came in, and she wanted to know if she could get pictures of a little girl up there. And it was great. I put the little girl in the first officer seat and put my hat on her and was answering questions and showing her like what the different controls did. And I told her, that, when you grow up, you can do anything. This is like great. And I just had this warm feeling like this is the next generation. Here's a young mom just being bold and showing her daughter, that she can do anything. And I was so happy that I was up there, to be the one to show her this. And when the little girl got out of the seat and they went to leave, the mom says to the little girl, she goes, that was so sweet that flight attendant showed you the cockpit, but when the pilots come, she's going to come back here and she's going to bring you a snack and you can thank her again. The whole time she thought I was a flight attendant sitting in the captain's. It didn't even make any sense. Yes. And this was, a young mom with a little girl. So there's a lot of still in this day and age, surprisingly, a lot of people just presume that if you're on an airplane and you're a girl, you're the flight attendant, and if you're a boy, you're the pilot. So, I wouldn't even say dealing with that. I thought that was pretty comical, but we have a ways to go.
Yes, we do. It feels like we are way past those ideas and those ways of thinking, but we're not, though, are we? We're still, especially in aviation, there's still a long way to go.
I think you hit the nail on the head in aviation. I think that if you're a doctor, a lawyer, all these other occupations have definitely diversified and people don't question it. But for some reason, aviation was the last industry, the last field to really make that adjustment. And people still, I think in a way, it might be like a fear thing. People just feel more comfortable seeing a gray-haired man with big broad shoulders and a deep gravelly voice in the cockpit. They just feel safer. Mm-hmm. And so when they don't see that, they kind of rationalize it that must be the case. They just aren't seeing it. So I think that it's not like an intentional, diss or anything. I think people just, a lot of people on a subconscious level, they just want to see that, gray-haired, experienced gentleman up there to feel safe.
Yeah, it's incredible. Over the weeks and months, we interview world champions from all the sports: paragliding, skydiving, acrobatics, paramotors, who are all female. And it feels like in a lot of air sports, the competitors have accepted and changed to understand that for male and female, you can be a champion, and they are as well. But it's strange that in the airlines, it's still got that kind of feel. But back in the day as well, about 10, 15 years ago, you had that seniority thing in the cockpit, even between males, didn't you? Where the second officer was sometimes not quite feeling confident to bring up issues with the captain that they might find for safety issues.
Yeah, I think we licked that probably more than 15 years ago. So, yes, that's where the whole CRM, CLR, the cockpit resource management came in, because we had a number of accidents where there was nothing wrong with the airplane, but because of lack of communication, because one pilot crew member who wasn't senior, who wasn't the captain, saw something and didn't feel comfortable expressing that. In fact, I flew with Bob Bragg, who was the first officer on the KLM Pan Am Tenerife collision, which I believe is still the largest aircraft accident in the history of the world. And Bob Bragg was the first officer on the Pan Am flight, and the last remaining survivor of that crew member of that accident. And his story, we had a very long flight. We were going, I can't remember, we were going to Asia, and we were flying multiple legs. And so we had dozens and dozens of hours just sitting in the cockpit, like over the Pacific in the dark. And he explained that whole accident to me and drew it out on a piece of paper and diagrammed it. And really what it came down to, the bottom line was a lack of communication, the fact that the second officer and they believe the first officer on the KLM flight did not think they had a clearance, did think that there was Pan Am still in the air on the runway, And I don't know if you're familiar with that accident, but Pan Am and KLM had a nose-to-nose collision because in the fog, KLM thought they were cleared to take off, but Pan Am was still back taxiing on the runway, and KLM basically just flew into United, and hundreds of people died. And the bottom line is that the crew members, except for the captain and KLM, it appears suspected that Pan Am was still on the runway and just didn't speak up, didn't stop the captain from taking off. And that has all changed. Now, and I think around the world, I think other countries maybe were a little slower, some nations than others, but now every pilot is equally respected. Everybody up there is trained, professional, and having more eyes just makes as a captain, I really want my first officer to speak up if he sees something, because God knows, one of us can't make a mistake without both of us making a mistake. We're both there. And I'm not going to see everything. And flight attendants also. If flight attendant hears or sees something in the back, please come and tell me. So it really just makes the captain's job easier when everybody participates and, shares their input, which I think they do now. I think we have gotten past that.
You've seen a lot of changes over the years in airlines, especially in the cockpit. The glass that you use and the instrumentation has changed beyond all recognition from your early days.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And it's funny because you don't realize, like when I started flying, I did, so I was a CFII when I was very young. And then I did freight and charter and cargo. And I did all sorts of, horrible jobs, working my way up to build hours. And in hindsight, I look back, like I used to fly a twin Cessna in the New York TCA in the middle of the night, single pilot flying canceled checks. And like a controller would give me flight of some intersection. Well, I had a single VOR. So here I am in the middle of the night trying to dial in the VOR, track one needle, and then change the frequency to put in a different VOR to try to figure out where the crossing was. And of course, now you just, type it in, follow the magenta line, and you're set. So life has gotten much easier as a pilot. I always thought, and this is just my opinion, just personally, my personal challenges, that the hardest part of flying was the navigating. Right. Actually, physically flying an airplane is not hard. It's fun. It's a mechanical, endeavor, and it's fun, and it's a hands-on. You kind of feel it.
Yes.
But navigating can be really complex. But now with GPS and modern technology, we get around the world and nothing's ever in doubt. Just where you are, to the foot at all times.
Do you still fly now, Laura? Are you still flying or not?
No, so I'm not flying. I'm medically grounded from United. I hurt my neck quite a while back and lost my first class medical. So that it's a bummer, but United has a great contract. We still get paid because I have a loss of medical insurance, and it's I flew for 21 years, so I had a very long full career, and now I realize how many more things I want to do with my life. Now I'm writing. I'm involved in all these other groups. I go up in smaller planes, which God knows I haven't done that in forever. So I'm just as involved in aviation. I just am able to, kind of switch over to a different aspect. And I feel like I'm, doing something, able to do something that counts now, maybe a little bit more than just flying.
It's a strange time for the aviation, for the airlines, should I say, with COVID. I mean, as a personal example, I was reporting from air sports events around the world. I was doing 80, 90 flights a year. I've not been anywhere apart from this apartment for 8 months. And so there's one case example of people not moving around the world like they were.
No, they sure aren't. The pilots are still busy because we're doing a lot of freight. We're doing a lot of flights that are just empty, doing cargo. We've been doing medical shipments around the world. I still have a lot of friends that are, flying, and they're as busy as they ever were, the wide bodies. They just don't have any passengers or any flight attendants. But and we're still doing some flights. My son's in college, and he'll hop a flight and fly back and forth. And it's great because I should say it's great because the planes are empty. That's not great. That's bad that the planes are empty. But it's very nice because anytime he wants to come home, he flies standby. There's not a chance he's going to get bumped. There's lots of empty seats, so he can just come and go back and forth as he pleases, which makes me happy. So, but I want the traffic to come back. I do think flying, as far as COVID is concerned, is very safe. Everything is sanitized. The airplane air is very clean. People don't realize the filters that we have. Honestly, I think that the air in an aircraft cabin is probably more sanitary than virtually any place you could go. Certainly more sanitary than the grocery store or Home Depot or wherever else you're gonna go to.
Absolutely. So your book, is it finished now? Has it been edited, or is it ready to go?
So my book is finished. It's called This Is Your Captain Speaking. And I do have an agent, but now we're in the process of, I've done my part, and now she's trying to find a publisher. I've had lots of people give me wonderful feedback, big publishing houses, but it's a really tough market. And since my book is primarily a memoir, it's more than that, but it's, the foundation of it is a memoir, and I'm not a famous person. So that makes it hard, I think, for these publishing houses to pick it up. But we'll get there.
We'll look forward to it, and we'll get you famous through this. So
there you go.
I look forward to catching up with your book, Laura, when it eventually comes out. But thanks for joining us on Air Sports News. I really enjoyed it. It's been a great chat.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Regan, for inviting me. It's been fun.
Thank you very much. Speak to you soon. You take care.
All right, thanks. You too.